And welcome to AI Transform podcast with myself, Tim Hughes, and Ed Fowler.
Hi, folks.
And we just to introduce and provide some context. Some of you may know that I do my own podcast, Tim Talks, and I interviewed Ed about artificial intelligence. And it was one of those shows, I do one every now and again, where it just goes ballistic. And we got so much feedback, good feedback, about AI and the discussion that we had, that we decided to run it as a fortnightly, so that's every 2 weeks for Americans, show, and just really find subjects that are out there in the news and the press and discuss them. And what we want this to be is educational. So we want your comments. If you see stuff out in the press and you either don't want to understand, you want to understand it, you don't understand it, you want to discuss it, you want advice, then please put it in the chat and we'll take that. We do have our own articles that we found over the last week that we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about AI in art, and we're going to talk about AI in education. But if there's something that you have, then please share that and we'll discuss it as well. And we'd love to take your comments and questions as we go through the show. Ed.
Awesome. Yep, that's exactly it. I mean, today we're going to discuss a couple of pointers. We looked at the recent contest of photography, that the winner was actually using AI and actually admitted it and handed it back. And the other one we're going to talk about was the recently published guidance for schools about how they check for the use
and education.
Yeah.
And what we're going to do is that we're going to run this every 2 weeks till July and just see how it goes.
Yeah.
If it works, it works. We may run it afterwards. It may be that AI, we've all been taken over by robots by then, so it doesn't matter.
It's entirely possible, I can tell you that.
Yes.
Awesome.
So the first article, Ed, I saw it on the BBC, which was the fact that there was this photography context.
Yeah.
And I must admit, when I saw the photo, I thought that's AI.
Well, it did have an immediate look of that sort of dreamlike fakes that used to be from the sort of 1890s.
And this person put it in as it was that they'd supposedly had taken the photograph, and then once they won it, it was a bit like they then admitted it had been created by AI, which is a bit like there's a news story about an ultra runner.
Yeah, who took a car for 2 miles.
Who took a 2-mile car journey. And was spotted because her Strava basically had her doing, was it
50 miles an hour?
50 miles an hour during which you couldn't, she was running faster than Usain Bolt for 2 miles. So what's your view about AI and art?
So I'm quite cynical in this one. Just for the contest in itself, I have a suspicion this is very good publicity for both the contest and the artist, because my initial reaction was exactly the same as yours. I thought, is this something that's been dug up from 1890, or is this something that's been generated by AI? Because it doesn't look like something you'd easily recreate with modern photography technology, even if you'd effectively painted it again inside Photoshop.
Damn boy.
But what it did, it's the dog. What it did look like to me, though, was a very interesting point that the quality of AI art has started to go up markedly, to the point where it's now actually they need to state that it's AI. And it introduced the fact is this is where does the balance between the AI and the conversation we had earlier, where does the balance between the AI and the brush end? Is this something that you just type in some buttons and it generates an image? Or is this something that the artist has imbued with meaning?
No. Well, I've got a friend, Brian Fanzo, who he's been working with NFTs and AI generated art now for 12 months, but he says it's AI generated. But for him, it's just a different brush. It's just a different material to use.
And I think that's. I mean, art has often been riven by this. I mean, there's the so-called controversies about Vermeer when he was discovered to be using a camera obscura, effectively tracing his images. So you put a model in front of it, lots of light, it would project an image back onto a canvas, and you would draw over the top. But that had been used for centuries beforehand, and it suddenly became a fashionable thing, and was both then triggered a new revolution leading to photography. And you look at, shall we say, techniques like perspective, which was first demonstrated in depth really by Brunelleschi, who was the great architect of the Renaissance. And there were riots. This was seen as heretical. How could you present or represent celestial beings in this foreshortened way? Within a year, every major artist in Florence was using the technique to demonstrate depth and perspective. It made things look more real. Art is a stage of evolution. Tools come through. Photography itself was predicted to be the end of painting, and painting seems to be pretty rude health to me. 3D modeling was presented to be the end of sculpture, and both of that, it's just another technique. I think what becomes interesting is provenance. So where did an image come from? Is the artist being open and said, look, this is this, or is it trying to be passed off? And I think that sort of focus on passing stuff off is where the real debate's going to come in. It's not that AI generates something, it's that somebody passes it off as not being generated by an AI. And I think that's a kind of a fundamental sort of thin end of the wedge. If you're using stuff to fake, then it's fake, no matter who generated it, whether you've made it yourself or gone into it. If it's presented honestly, it's authentic. It doesn't matter what you use to make it. People use Photoshop all the time. Nobody denigrates their skills as a photographer. It's all about taking the tools you have and creating a piece of statement that has meaning. And I think it's going to be something that's very much going to have to be debated at large. I think a lot of the art community are going to have to wake up to it and actually get a bit closer to it. I remember seeing as a teenager a BBC piece with David Hockney on it.
Yeah,
one of the first adopters. It was his first adoption of computer art, computer generated imagery.
Yes.
And this idea that he could draw an image and delete. And he was entranced by it and actually took it into mainstream of the remainder of his career. I think still
there's a fantastic exhibition with David Hockney. He's my favorite artist who's alive, at the Lightbox in London. And he did two things that were a number of things groundbreaking. One is that he took photography, and there's a narrative that he gives in this it's all projected over the walls, and he talks about how with a photograph, you take the photograph and all you have is that second. And what he started to do was create these images where he took multiple photographs, and over time, so there was he took photographs of these two friends doing the Times crossword, and he took it over time, and part of the time was the time the person where they went, what's the clue? Oh, that's the answer. I'm going to put the pen down, and actually built that out over several photos. And that was a way of changing the way photography was used as a form of art.
And I think that's actually a really good point, because the use of tools like this is very good at exploring possibilities of representation. You can ask it to generate things that you yourself wouldn't necessarily have thought of. And I've played a lot with Midjourney and DALL-E when it first came out, attempting to make it do stuff new. So could you create the front cover of an FT in the style of a 1950s pulp sci-fi?
I think your dog could.
Yeah, he probably could. Yeah, I don't know what he's after. But it's that type of stuff which is and it's going to lead to, I think, a burst of expression, which then people are going to have conversations about did I write this or did the AI write it? Did I draw this or did the AI write it, etc.
And I think that as long as people are actually saying that they're using it, just as much as we may use charcoal or other other forms of art, I think it's a quite a legitimate form, and giving it to David Hockney and saying, because his drawings on the iPad. The great thing about the drawing on the iPad is that it actually remembers the sequence, so you can play it. So it basically up on the screen it draws the thing as he drew it.
And that's really interesting, because it can actually at that point, and this is the one thing you can't do with AI, is modern tools like that you can show and explain. But excuse me, I'm just going to have to pause for 30 seconds.
Yeah, sure. I'm just to say, no dogs were hurt during the filming of this podcast.
I do apologize, folks. What he had done is pushed a ball under the sofa.
The old ball one.
Yes. So yes, it's a real thing about sort of explainability, because you can ask an artist their process. You can't really get an AI to explain its process. It's hard enough to get it to explain where it got the data from first. So it's a very interesting route forward, I think, is going to be the phrase.
So 10 minutes left. That's halfway through. The big subject is AI in education.
Huge, and that's it's where we're going to see an awful lot of knee-jerk reaction. So the initial advice that's been issued at the moment is that exam boards have to look at this stuff as if you effectively supervise it. Children can't be trusted to use AI in any way that isn't generating the final product. They're only looking at what can it be done right now. So what the current idea is that students' work must always include a portion which is directly supervised. That work means that the teacher can see the tools they are using to guarantee the authenticity of the output and ensure that the child knows the topic they're talking about.
Is this a similar sort of argument to when calculators came out?
It's exactly that. And I can, well, both of us remember, you weren't allowed any form of aid in certain maths classes.
Because when my dad was banned from using a slide rule, he had to use logbooks. And do you remember the books that used to be issued at school? Probably nobody does.
Yeah, I don't think they do at all. I think nobody uses a slide rule. Nobody uses, to a degree, that form of logarithmic calculation. You just ask a calculator. And if you ask some very proficient engineers, when was the last time they did anything back to first principles like that? They simply don't. They just use, well, why on earth would you use a computer to calculate that? I've got a job to do. I think there's a balance between testing memory and testing knowledge. And I think that's what we're going to have to focus on here, because if the AI can replicate simple tasks, it can certainly stand in substitute for intrinsic knowledge, intrinsic memory. But it doesn't mean that you don't know it, because you have to know how to use the tool.
Because there's this debate, isn't there, around whether education is about remembering facts or whether it's about using, being able to be curious and using those things. And I've asked people this over the last week, and the answer is, well, we need both of those.
We do. And I think what education is going to have to learn is certain things. There's a lot of debate around, say, that ChatGPT-4 can already pass the Massachusetts bar, can already pass the general medical examination. And that doesn't say to me that we have a threat to those professions. It means actually that the exams themselves weren't that much use. They were lazy.
Yes.
They tested memory, because that's all it was. They haven't tested creative understanding. So in each case, you're presented with a hypothetical solution, which is described in words. You have to respond back using references and cycles. You're not presented with the actual problem, which is, here is a patient, or here is a lawsuit that is
a scalpel.
Yeah, fix. So that's the thing that you're going to see. Now, as generative AI in particular moves on, it may be able to address that in very different ways. It may be able to just say, actually, we can present a scenario to a new way. I think what educators are failing to see is the opportunity it presents. You could use ChatGPT to write very, very, very imaginative tests for children. Instead of asking them to do homework to ensure understanding, get them to play back something that requires genuine creativity and accept that ChatGPT was involved in the process, in the same way that you accept a pen is used in the process and we don't use chalk. It's just, again, as you said, it's another brush.
Yeah, there was a great debate on the World Economic Forum webinar that I watched, where there was a very passionate educator speaking at about, I think about 12 minutes in, where she was saying that the things that we need in terms of education is, there's skills that we need to be able to understand what is fake and what is real.
Yeah, and
not that fake is particularly bad, but just to understand what it is.
Yeah,
because if you look at, my partner's mother is forever getting calls saying, this is the bank here, and can you send me your money?
Yeah. And I think that's the type of stuff that we're going to see, that authenticity. And there'll be, like, as we said, an arms race as we get AI tools inside, say, handsets or in your web browsers or whatever, that will inform you this is a scam, or even just something to push it back.
Because I think that's a really important point, Ed, in terms of futures, which is that, there's there's been a lot of work done in social networks, though quite often it's not talked about, around photos and whether they're fake photos or the type of photos that are
some material, offensive materials.
And I think that we've had changes in the phone so that I now know, if your number isn't in my address book, it shows me that, so I know when there's a cold call.
And it is also, you get it on Samsung.
And so
report that it's a scam or a fake or something.
So, and I think that's where people need to be. Will be going. There must be
already is. I mean,
in labs in Apple and Samsung to basically say, is this fake or not? And if it is fake, does it matter? Because a meme's fake.
Yeah. It's all about intent and presentation. I think, we know that Samsung certainly is looking very hard at Apple. There was that bit of a scandal where Samsung engineers were reputedly copying code into ChatGPT.
Allegedly,
without potentially being fully aware of the fact that they've just transferred that knowledge to ChatGPT. And I think there's going to be a sort of that arms race between provider and recipient about intent. Is this passing itself off as something? As we said with the conversation about art and education, is this trying to pass itself off or misrepresent itself? Because the thing itself can be anything. It's creative. It doesn't have to be something else. So it's going to be a fascinating way forward, I believe. And certainly the big news I'll be looking forward is the first AI voice tools that come onto the handsets. And they're due early next year, is the phrasing from both Apple and Samsung.
So what are they going to do?
Initially, translators. So the very first ones are AI tools that clear up background noise. So Sid, the dog, would be deleted out of it. And that's an AI. It looks for spikes and goes, right, that's not sound I want to transmit, move forward. The next stage will be things like...
you see, shut up now, look.
Yeah, one hopes so. It's sometimes difficult to understand what they're after when the ball has just been pushed back under the sofa. I think one of the things that we'll also look for next is when there's breakups in text. So the first one's creating a background. The second one is if the signal breaks out, they will actually correct by guessing what the word will be and effectively fake your voice over it. And then the third one's...
That's really interesting because, of course, everyone's going, I don't want my voice faked.
Yes, and they'll do it instantaneously. That's already done. Microsoft have a tooling that they demonstrated, and so has Google, that they can do it with less than 5 seconds of your voice. And that's you faked with a distinction that even your mum can't fake. And you kind of go, wow, that's obviously got some benefits, as in, I broke up there, I guess what you said, to actually some pretty nefarious stuff, as we said, with your granny getting a phone call purporting to be you. There will be the third stage, which is then complete generation of experience. So I'm speaking to you in French, you're listening in German.
Yeah.
The audience are going to hear us in English, and our faces will be regenerated to match the sounds that the computer generates.
Wow.
And that is really close. There's an awful lot of money going into real-time assured translation, where it gives you transcripts, etc. And that technology is so close to going mainstream. What's bragging at the moment is sort of them proving the ethics are going to work. What was the training data? What was the meaning? How did this work? How did that work? And I think once they've worked out how they're going to document that and put it forward, that will go straight into action.
So we got about a minute left.
Yeah.
What about the Drake rap song that's been created?
Well, so it's been pulled now. So they've taken it off.
And there's also, I don't know if you saw, but there was an Oasis album generated through AI as well.
And I think those artists who have spent an awful lot of money protecting their lyrics, their style, their presentation, are going to face a constant barrage of impersonation.
The comment that I saw on Facebook was, well, it just shows how easy it is to replicate it.
It is.
Whereas Nick Cave, for example, they tried to replicate
it. It didn't work at all.
And they couldn't do it.
No, it didn't look. So I think what's going to happen is certain forms of art, we're going to end up moving into almost live performance only, because your home AI will be able to generate, I don't know, anything in the style of anybody for as long as you want. And it will
look at ABBA with the
the holograms.
The hologram thing that's in London. I've not been, but it's a whole it was all videoed, and they just that must be a great way of making money.
Well, I think but it's also you're selling that in a different way. They're not being sold as ABBA, it's been sold as this experience.
It is being sold, yeah.
It's an experiential performance is going to move forward. I think we're out of time, unfortunately, Tim.
And what's your dog's name, Ed?
Sid. It's actually
Sid.
my mother-in-law's dog.
Oh right, okay. Well, and so in the so first and foremost, Ed, thank you for. I think it's been a great chat.
And thanks for having me again, Tim.
And in the world, and you know, on the internet, there is actually a battle between dogs versus cats.
There is,
and I think today dogs won.
They did, and certainly he'd run away from those cats, but there's none in this house, so he's happy. Thank you very much, folks. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everybody.